We have officially entered crunch time for fantasy football. You got to make the playoffs. You got to get there. In this video, I will show you every single thing you need for every matchup this week. Sportsbook odds to give us an advanced analytical edge over player projections, weather updates, wide receiver and cornerback matchups, which you guys love so much more. Hit that like button if you do appreciate the amount of analytical effort and time that goes into this video, and subscribe if you want to be on the right side of fantasy football championships with the rest of us getting this video every single week. But let's get to it. And we will start with the Bills and the Texans on Thursday night. This is a -6 spread for the Bills to take a win in this one. A pretty low game total at 43.5. It is an indoor stadium, though. The Texans are home, so we have absolutely no worries about the weather here. The only issue is the defenses. We can see, again, this is a lower point total. You look at the Bills side of things, the Houston Texans defense are very good in all aspects, allowing the #1 least amount of fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Very low down there in wide receiver points, running back points, wide receiver, tight end, literally everything. One thing we do know is that Dalton Kincaid is going to be out for this matchup, leaving Dawson Knox as the primary tight end. The only issue is he really isn't the primary tight end. Jackson Hawes has been getting a lot of run as well. Dawson Knox is not going to be a strong start. Maybe he'll score a touchdown and save his day, but it's not something that we can expect and bank on. You look at the wide receivers here. Khalil Shakir looks like he has a very negative matchup against Jalen Petrie. We will get to that, but we have Keon Coleman questionable. He isn't injured. He's just been benched due to coach's decision for missing team meetings. It is very possible he misses Thursday night again. At the time of this recording, we don't know. If he does, it'll be Josh Palmer. It'll be Tyrell Shavers. Both those guys, Derek Stingley, Kamari Lassiter, I'm not running that risk with. You look down here at some of these stats. The Houston Texans down here at the bottom are allowing 10.4 wide receiver completions per game and only 2.5 completions for tight ends. That is insanely bad. I do not like that for this Bills offense. The one way you can beat the Texans defense here is through the slot. As you can see, they're allowing the 14th most wide receiver fantasy points per game to slot wide receivers, which is why Khalil Shakir is a fine start for me this week, even considering how bad this matchup is. And we look at the Texans. Davis Mills is starting for us, a top 10 matchup for him, but not going to be a guy we can put in our lineups. Woody Marks, though, after a disappointing week last week and what was supposed to be an amazing fantasy day against the Tennessee Titans defense, does nothing. Very, very bad. Now gets one against the Bills defense, who are second in fantasy points allowed to the running back position. They just let Sean Tucker go for 3 touchdowns, 30-plus fantasy points, and over 100 yards. This is one where I do like starting Woody Marks. We look at the wide receivers. Nico Collins, he gets a decent cornerback matchup here. Jaden Higgins also gets a pretty decent one. We do have Christian Kirk, though, at the slot wide receiver position, which we will look into, might be valuable. Dalton Schultz, though, this Bills defense is allowing the #1 least fantasy points to opposing tight ends. I do think this could be a spot where that kind of changes for Dalton Schultz, but you look down here at the Texans stats here. Mills is targeting the outside wide receivers way more. So Nico Collins, Jaden Higgins, than he is the slot wide receivers in Christian Kirk and the running backs for the checkdowns, which is makes Woody Marks a little bit more boom or bust. But you look at the Bills stats here. They're allowing the second most yards per carry to opposing running backs, the first #1 most touchdowns to running backs at 17 total. Very good for Woody Marks. Also the second most rush yards per game. But you look down here, very last in pass yards per game allowed, which is actually surprising. You wouldn't expect that when you look at this offense and this defense here. You are going to be able to go through and start Dalton Schultz given the really negative matchup. It's just going to be so much more risky. And we drop it down to the Colts here and the Chiefs. We look at the spread, -3.5 for the Chiefs to win this one. A pretty high game total, so we don't have to be worried about that at all. 3-mile-an-hour winds. It's sunny, beautiful day. Chiefs are home. Absolutely no worry about the weather in this one. Now we go look at these fantasy matchups here. The Colts are in a terrible one against this Chiefs defense. They are pretty much bottom 5 in every single fantasy point allowed to all positions. Daniel Jones gets a little bit more of a positive one, so we can start him. Just be aware, he is dropping down the rankings for this week. We have Michael Pittman against Trent McDuffie there. We have Alec Pierce against his corner, and then we have Josh Downs in the slot. Tyler Warren, again, very negative matchup against the Chiefs. You don't really have a choice, though. If you have him, you have to be starting him. And then the Chiefs side of things, Patrick Mahomes gets a neutral matchup. You can be starting him against the Colts. Isaiah Pacheco is doubtful and questionable coming into this week. I don't think he is going to play. It doesn't make Kareem Hunt a super strong start if that does happen. They're both going to be risky if they do. But the wide receivers here is really what's important for this Chiefs team, because the Colts are allowing a decent amount of points to the position. As we can see, Kenny Moore, very, very positive. We're lucky Rashid Rice gets the most positive cornerback matchup of the week for them. Xavier Worthy gets a pretty tough one here in his matchup. And then we have Hollywood Brown against Blackman. That's not very positive either. But the Colts defense, You beat them through the slot wide receiver role, and you beat them through the right wide receiver on the opposite side of the left guy. Luckily for us, the right wide receiver is Rashee Rice every single week. So that's going to be really positive for him. Expect him to finish as a wide receiver 1 this week. But you see, the Colts have been better with Sauce. Sauce is playing on the left side, though, which is going to be matched up against Xavier Worthy. So it's going to be a bit tougher for Worthy to have a good game this week. And the Chiefs' defense are simply just good against wide receivers. I mean, you can see all the red on screen here. We don't really have to worry too much about that. And then we look at the Seahawks and the Tennessee Titans. Again, a pretty low game total here. If you look at 40.5 points, most of that is because of the Seahawks. I mean, look at this spread, minus 13.5. The Titans are cooked, guys. The Titans stand no chance. 3-mile-an-hour winds, a little tiny chance of rain, but again, Titans are home, very good weather. You don't have to concern yourself with the wind or that. The Seahawks side of things, you're looking at their offense, it's pretty much green throughout the whole thing. It's a top 10 matchup for literally everybody. I will get into JSN because he has the best matchup this week. Amore Davis is very, very positive to fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, in my opinion, both can be started with a little bit of caution at flex spots this week, only because they're splitting snaps with each other. But we know the Tennessee Titans defense is very, very positive in allowing points to running backs, even if Woody Marks wasn't able to capitalize on that last week. Cooper Kupp gets the more negative wide receiver matchup here against Harris, the slot corner. It's a little bit tougher. I don't love starting Cooper Kupp again because there is a very real chance with this spread. If the Seahawks get up early and quick, maybe they'll lean on the run game that much more, which is why I like these running backs here. Shaheed gets a decent matchup too, but again, with this blowout potential, it is a bit risky. We see with the stats here at the bottom, the Tennessee Titans defense is tighter against the slot, but I mean, outside wide receivers, they can't stop anything. You look at the Titans here, you don't really want to start anybody. You're obviously not starting Ward, Tony Pollard, Tajay Spears. Tajay Spears will probably be more valuable here because of the catch-up game script, but either way, Chimere DK is really the only guy against Nick Emanwari, which is somewhat positive because as you can see, the Seahawks defense here, the way you beat them is through the slot wide receivers. So he should have a decent game if anybody will. Calvin Ridley's out for the rest of the season. Alec Iomenor gets a pretty tough one against Tariq Woolen. And then we look at Chigakonkwo. The Seahawks, the one thing that they don't account for is the tight end. So Chigakonkwo as a check down safety blanket can be looked at for another straight good week like last week. And we drop it down here to the Vikings and the Packers. We see the spread here, not too crazy, but I mean, 9. J.J. McCarthy, man, he just has not been looking good. The defense for the Packers is a top one. I will be dropping the defensive rankings later this week. If you guys haven't subscribed or have your post notifications on, make sure to do that. The spread is relatively low for this one. Not a ton of scoring, but again, 6-mile-an-hour winds is a little bit higher than these previous games, 40-something degrees. Packers are home. Again, no worry about the weather here. J.J. McCarthy does get the most positive matchup as far as all Viking starters, but he's throwing interceptions. He's not looking that efficient. I don't love starting him in this matchup. Aaron Jones, pretty neutral one, again with the wide receivers as well. Valentine and Nixon are pretty negative corners. The Packers are pretty good in stopping that, and TJ Hawkinson, again, gets a neutral matchup. So you're starting Justin Jefferson, even though he's been averaging less than 15 fantasy points per game since his week 6 bye, you kind of just have to go with it. Jordan Addison is going to be a bit more of a boomer bust option. And you look at the Packers here, the Vikings defense is very good on pretty much all fronts. I mean, bottom 5 in every single category almost, but the wide receivers specifically are very negative. I mean, you have Murphy, you have Isaiah Rodgers, you have all of these guys that are really good there, and the tight end position actually is their one weak point. I would not go through and trust Luke Musgrave, though. We saw Fitzpatrick come in and actually run more routes than him. I do think Musgrave will work in and get more snaps at some point, but it is way too early to say that now. And you look at these defensive points here, the Green Bay defense, great versus the slot. Absolutely amazing. They're allowing some of the least points to slot wide receivers, so that is not good at all to Jalen Nailor. Luckily, nobody is starting Jalen Nailor anyways, and for the Minnesota Vikings defense, you exploit them through the middle of the field and the slot, which is going to be Matthew Golden. That doesn't make him that much stronger of a start for me. Again, it's so risky, and we have so many wide receivers here. I don't love it unless you absolutely need to. We look down here at the Jets and the Ravens matchup here. The spread is, oh my goodness, so far. 13.5 point spread for the Ravens. This has only been increasing. Tyrod Taylor has been named the starter for this team. You look at the over under 44.5, actually isn't even that low. 90% of that is expected to go to the Ravens, though. We look at the Jet side of things. The Ravens defense is actually pretty positive. They have been playing better as of late. And again, I have stats here at the bottom that I will show you guys in a second. But we look at Breece Hall, very positive matchup for him. Tyrod Taylor actually does target the running backs at a decent level, so he should be fine in this one. A.D. Mitchell and John Mechie get positive matchups against Awuzie and Wiggins. Still, though, A.D. Mitchell, I think, can be a stash. Starting this early in the year, probably no for fantasy football. And you look at Mason Taylor here, one of the most negative matchups against this Ravens defense. You really want to stay far away from this Jets team, so I won't spend too much time on them. But the Ravens on the other side, you can start Lamar Jackson. You can start all of your studs here. There is a potential of a blowout, so I do think Derrick Henry, even Keaton Mitchell can be a decent look. I mean, you're not starting Keaton Mitchell, but just be aware if he falls in the end zone, I wouldn't be surprised. And Derrick Henry, this should be a good one given the matchup. Zay Flowers does get the more positive matchup. Here we see the Jets defense is actually really, really bad. Without Sauce Gardner, they have been tanking in defensive efficiency. Their right wide receiver is the exploit on defense, and that is Zay Flowers. The left side is a lot better, but where they're missing Sauce Gardner, Zay Flowers should have a decent game, even considering this blowout potential against Thomas. Then we have Stevens as well for Rashad Bateman. Andrews and Likely, I would not start Mark Andrews. Again, he is a touchdown or bust. He got lucky on that fake tush push last week. I just don't really want to trust any of them. You're going to be hoping that they fall in the end zone. And the Ravens defense has actually been getting better over the past few weeks in fantasy points allowed and EPA per play. So just keep that in mind for the future weeks. Looking at the Giants and the Lions here, another spread that is not really that close, minus 10.5 for the Lions. Not because the Giants are bad, just because the Lions are that good. We probably will have Jackson Dart coming back from concussion protocol, but if we don't, I got you guys covered. This game is very, very high game total at 50. That's one of the highest of the week, and it's an indoor stadium. Lions are home. No weather concerns there. Again, we look at the quarterback situation for the Giants. You're not going to be starting Jameis Winston if he does play. You can start Jackson Dart, though. You look at the running backs here. The Lions are allowing some of the least amount of fantasy points to opposing running backs this year. Tyron Tracy, Devin Singletary. If you can sit them, I would consider doing it. Devin Singletary has been taking 100% of the goal line work, but Tyron Tracy is getting all the third downs, all the receiving, and if we have Jackson Dart in this game, less touchdown upside for them. We look at the wide receivers here. Wan'Dale Robinson actually gets the more positive one against Amik Robertson, and you have Darius Slayton questionable coming into this one against DJ Reed, which is the more negative wide receiver matchup. But you see 11th in fantasy points allowed is still pretty good. Theo Johnson is a bit more negative for this Lions defense. He didn't really do that good with Jameis Winston in the pass volume there, so it's not the strongest start. But you see here at the notes at the bottom, the Lions defense here, they are 10th versus EPA per play for against the run. They are really, really good against running backs. Again, another reason we're not starting these Giants guys. We look at the Giants defense, they're actually pretty decent against the slot, but everywhere else, they are so bad. So Amon-Ra is getting a great matchup here against Phillips. We have Jameson Williams against Flott. Now that Dan Campbell is calling the plays, Jameson Williams has resurged himself, so he can be a start this week as well. The slot wide receiver in Khalif Raymond gets a pretty negative one here against the Giants defense, but it's not like anybody's starting him anyways. You're starting all your top guys. I would not look for Brock Wright in this one, filling in for Sam Laporta. And now we're looking at the Steelers and the Bears here. If you guys are enjoying this video, please make sure to hit that like button for all the statistical analytics that go into this. But it's a very close projected game, minus 3-point spread for the Bears. We know they keep every single game close. Aaron Rodgers is questionable for this one, likely why the spread is that close, and a relatively low game total at 45 points. Luckily for the quarterbacks, though, this defense is not that great for the Bears here. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, Mason Rudolph, you're not really going to be starting them. 5-mile-an-hour winds. Bears are home. No weather concerns in this one as well. This isn't a big week for weather. But you look at Jaylen Warren. He is coming into this game questionable. If he does miss, Kenneth Gainwell is going to be a great start. If they're both playing, Warren is a start. But again, I have a feeling he's going to be somewhat restricted. It's not the most positive matchup, but it's not one that we have to avoid. DK Metcalf gets one against Nashawn Wright. And then we have Calvin Austin against Gardner Johnson. This one is more negative, but DK's is not much better. All the tight ends here for the Steelers, Darnell Washington, Jonnu Smith, Pat Freiermuth, everybody gets a decent matchup, but because they all play, it makes all of them bad starts. And we look at the Bears defense here. We have Caleb Williams getting a pretty good matchup against the Steelers defense, but more importantly, the wide receivers. They are allowing some of the most points to opposing wide receivers so far this year. I mean, we have Darius Slay being the most positive of these matchups. So the fact that Luther Burden has taken over Olamide Zaccheaus for the starting slot wide receiver, he should only be seeing more and more snaps. Now, he's still not at a very high route participation rate because we do have DJ Moore and Rome Odunze healthy and in this offense, so he's not a must start, but he has a good matchup. If you're in a deeper league, you can. DJ Moore against Eccles gets the more negative matchup out of all these guys. Rome Odunze against Joey Porter Jr. He's been pretty hit or miss so far this year, but we look at the running backs for the Bears, DeAndre Swift and Kyle Monangai. The one thing the Steelers are very consistent at, it's stopping the run, and they do not allow a lot of fantasy points, so I would not trust putting Kyle Monangai in our lineup this week. He will be touchdown or bust. DeAndre Swift has been getting a decent enough amount of usage to where the negative matchup isn't as worrisome for him, but the Bears defense here, they are great versus left wide receivers. That is DK Metcalf when we look back at him. So he does carry a lot more boom bust potential, but he really is the only wide receiver you're starting or can start out of these guys. I would start Odunze, DJ Moore, I would leave on the bench if possible. And Colson Loveland, yes, he gets a good matchup, but in the games where Cole Kmet is healthy, he is running a considerable less amount of routes, so it's not somebody we want to trust or really put in our starting lineups. We look at the Patriots and the Bengals here, probably the biggest fantasy question game that I have seen so far. I mean, the Patriots are projected to win this game by a healthy amount, a relatively high game total as well. 3-mile-an-hour winds, very low chance of rain, very nice weather. Bengals are home, no weather concerns in this one either. And we look at the fantasy point projections for these guys. Drake May, I mean, this Bengals defense is allowing 1,000,000 points to everybody. So him, all of the running backs here. Travion Henderson is going to be a smash start again this week if we do not have Ramondre Stevenson. Turf toe, looking like he won't play again. Will he ever play this season? Who knows? But that's a question for another day. Travion Henderson is a top 10 running back. If that is true, you are starting him. This Bengals defense is allowing 1,000,000 points to the position. Stephon Diggs does get one of the most positive matchups here against Daxton Hill. That's very positive. The slot corner for the Bengals is just allowing a lot of fantasy points. Kayshon Bouttie's questionable coming into this matchup against DJ Turner. If he's healthy, it will be a positive one. If not, that corner slots down to Josh Newton. He bumps up, and then Matt Collins here. I wouldn't trust Matt Collins a ton, but again, if we don't have Boutte, he can be a start. And then we have Hunter Henry getting the number one best matchup. The Bengals are allowing a ton of points there. He is still splitting snaps with Austin Hooper, but this should be a spot where he can dominate. We look at the Bengals side of things. Joe Flacco, decent matchup for him. The one thing the Patriots, I can't say the one thing, but the main thing they're good at is stopping the run. So Chase Brown is going to have to rely on those receptions to be valuable. He still can be started since he does get a good amount of those. But we look at T. Higgins. There is no Jamar Chase because he spat last week. So T. Higgins is our wide receiver 1 against Christian Gonzalez. It is a negative matchup. You can see as a whole here, the Patriots are pretty neutral in allowing fantasy points to wide receivers, but as specific cornerback matchups on a per route basis, Christian Gonzalez is pretty good. Marcus Jones is also pretty decent. Carlton Davis there as well. But one thing I want to point out here is the tight end spot for the Bengals. Noah Fant actually gets a pretty positive matchup. And in games where we don't have Jamar Chase and or T. Higgins, the tight ends are targeted at an insanely higher rate. So if you do need a tight end, I do think Noah Fant can be a decent start for us here. We look down here at the New England defense here. You beat them through the slot wide receivers. It's going to be really good for Andre Yoshivas because of that. Again, though, you're really only starting him because of the amount of pass volume that Joe Flacco throws every single week, not because of the good matchup. So he does carry a lot of boom bust risk. And the Bengals defense here are first in EPA per play to the wide receivers on passes. So that just shows you how positive this matchup here is. Looking down here at the Browns and the Raiders matchup, a very, very low game total, under 40 points. I think this is the lowest game total of the week. You do not want to be putting your flex fringe guys in this matchup. It's supposed to be a close game, so Ashton Genty might not be that bad of a start. We will get into it. Another indoor stadium. Raiders are home. I guess that helps them a little bit. That's why they're favored just by a small amount. But the more important reason why they're favored is because we're more than likely going to have Shedeur Sanders starting at quarterback for this team. And I'm loving the Raiders defense because of that. Shedeur Sanders, I want to see him play, but it is not going to be fantasy viable for any of these guys. You're going to hope he throws checkdowns. You're going to hope Quinshon Judkins and this team stays on the field enough to get fantasy usage. Quinshon Judkins does scare me a little bit because of that. Jerry Jeudy and Cedric Tillman against this Raiders defense, such a positive matchup. But can we take advantage of it is the issue. Blue Kelly is the most positive corner in allowing fantasy points to slot wide receivers in their slot corner, so that's great for Tillman. Stokes is also positive to this outside wide receivers and Jeudy. You can look down here at the Browns and the Raiders defense here. The Raiders cannot stop the slot. Like, they cannot at all. They're top 3 in fantasy points allowed there, so Cedric Tillman can be a start. I'm expecting if Shedeur Sanders is going to throw the ball, it's probably going to be to the tight ends and short wide receiver routes. But again, we really don't know what to expect here. I'm scared for Jerry Jeudy. You look at the tight ends here. The Raiders are allowing some of the least amount of fantasy points to tight ends, so I'm worried for them too. The Raiders side of things, I mean, you see all of this red. The Browns defense is absolutely amazing. Bottom 5 in pretty much every single metric for the defense here. And you see they're 32nd in slot points per game. So we are not starting Tyler Lockett in this matchup. It's so disgusting. Ward, Harden, I mean, they're really good corners. Bowers can be started because where else is the ball going to go? But it is very, very scary in that one. We look down here at the Jaguars and the Cardinals in this one. Very close game total, relatively high as well. Another indoor stadium. The Cardinals are home. We can expect a pretty decent game from Jacoby Brissett for that, but we will get into it. We look at the Jaguar side of things. This Cardinals defense is pretty hit or miss. They're pretty good at stopping wide receiver points against the quarterbacks, but for the running backs, they're a complete funnel. Travis Etienne can be started. Bayshaw Tootin is questionable coming into this week. He had a really, really strong week last one, so he can be started. Again, consider the high game total only at a flex spot, though. Again, coming in with an injury, he'll probably see less snaps, but I like it more for Travis Etienne. We look here, Brian Thomas Jr. is also questionable coming into this one. Max Melton is a pretty neutral corner. Same with Will Johnson and Williams. I do think Jacoby Myers is going to be more of the hit or miss, and Malik Washington in the slot is going to be pretty hit or miss. Brenton Strange is questionable coming into this one. It's a very positive matchup if for whatever reason he does play, but it's going to make all of these targets and wide receivers just that much more diluted. And we look here at the defense here. The Arizona defense is just getting worse. Like, they have been getting worse by the week. 22nd to start the year in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers and EPA per play allowed. And over the last couple games, I mean, they have been 9th. Like, it is completely switching around. So the Arizona defense isn't as positive as we think. So if Brian Thomas Jr. is healthy, we're playing him. We look at the Cardinals side of things. The Jacksonville defense is number 1 in fantasy points allowed to outside wide receivers. And we just saw Michael Wilson get 18 targets, over 150 yards, a crazy amount of fantasy points. And he gets a positive matchup against Greg Newsome. So Michael Wilson is a start this week, considering we don't have Marvin Harrison in this matchup. Jacoby Brissett gets a top 4 matchup against this defense too. He can be picked up off the waiver wire and started. Greg Dortch, though, yes, he does have a top 15 matchup, but Jordan Lewis and this Jacksonville defense is allowing the 30th least amount of fantasy points to slot wide receivers. So even though he had a decent target share last week, it was 6 targets. Jacoby Brissett threw 57 passes. That's a 10% target share. Was not good, even if it looked pretty decent. So do not start Greg Dortch. And Trey McBride, second best matchup. He should absolutely destroy in this game. Again, high game total. We love everything for them. We look down at the Eagles and the Cowboys, possibly the one game that I've seen the most questions about because of this Eagles wide receiver core. We look at the game spread, -3.5, very, very close, and a pretty decently high game total. The Cowboys are home in this one. It should help them out a little bit in an indoor stadium, so no weather concerns. We look at the Eagles, though. Look at this defense. The Cowboys defense are not stopping anybody. They're first in fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks, 4th to running backs, top 2 to wide receivers, pretty decent against the tight ends as well. So you're going to be starting Saquon, you're going to be starting Jalen Hurts, but we look down here at the stats a little bit. I mean, the Cowboys defense has been better versus the run after that trade with the Jets. A lot of the Eagles offensive line is banged up, so it is a little bit more worrisome for Saquon Barkley. He's outside my top 5 running backs this week because of it. It's still Saquon Barkley, though, so you're going to be starting him. A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith, though, do get some pretty good matchups against Carson and Bland. I do like A.J. Brown more than I do Devonta Smith here, but it's going to be very hit or miss from what we've seen in this offense, and Dallas Goedert is going to be a touchdown or bust kind of tight end like he's been all season. Looking at the Cowboys, though, we kind of see the rainbow here of starting green and getting to red. Prescott gets a positive matchup. He should be started with the amount of pass volume expected. Javonte Williams, the run defense for the Eagles is a lot more positive, and you look at the wide receivers here for CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens. You beat the Eagles by taking the right wide receiver and putting him on an island, and that is CeeDee Lamb. They're allowing the 7th most fantasy points to wide receivers on the right side of the field. CeeDee Lamb should cook in this matchup. Very high positive game total. We have Jackson on him, Quinyon Mitchell on George Pickens, which is the more negative matchup. I do not like Jake Ferguson in this one. The Eagles don't allow a lot of fantasy points to the position, but again, with the pass volume and the touchdown upside, it can be considered. We drop it down to the Falcons and the Saints. Another pretty low game total here, a very close spread. We are not going to have Michael Penix in this matchup, so we have Kirk Cousins starting, but you look at the Saints defense, they're pretty much mid, like just average to every single fantasy point to every single position. We see, again, indoor stadium, Saints are home, no worry about the weather. We do have Quincy Riley on Darnell Mooney. We don't have Drake London in this matchup, so it moves Mooney up the depth chart a little bit. I do think he can be a start. The more positive matchup is Kool-Aid McKinstry against Kadero Hodge, though. We're not going to be starting Kadero Hodge. He's had his moments before. I mean, Kyle Pitts probably going to get the biggest upgrade from the quarterback and the wide receiver injuries here. Bijan Robinson should get a lot of checkdowns as well. The Saints defense is great versus slot wide receivers, so David Stills cannot be started, not like you would anyways, but they are a lot more positive to outside guys, which is Darnell Mooney. So He's running a lot of routes. He's getting a decent target share. This should be the game he puts it together. We look at the Saints side of things. The Atlanta defense is very, very weak versus the left wide receiver, and that is Devon Vele. So maybe in deeper leagues, he is a start. It's a decently positive matchup for him. AJ Terrell, though, is going to be put on him if it's not Chris Olave. So that's tough. Mike Hughes is the more positive cornerback matchup. And you look at Alvin Kamara. Should be a start for him, but how many snaps will he really see coming out of the bye? We have no idea. It is extremely risky, but the one place the Falcons are very susceptible is points allowed to the running back, so bring your restrictions coming in and starting him, and we have Juwan Johnson here. Pretty negative matchup here. I would not be considering starting him. The Buccaneers and the Rams, both of these defense pose a very interesting fantasy point total here. I mean, the Rams are projected to win this game by a good amount, another pretty high game total, and guess what? Rams are home, indoor stadium at SoFi, no weather concerns here. The Rams defense is very hit or miss for what they do. They don't allow a lot of points to quarterbacks or running backs. Bucky Irving is doubtful. I really don't think he's going to play in week 12. He is a buy low candidate if you have a winning record and you can afford him to miss a few more weeks if he does. Tucker, though, really, really good game last week against the Bills defense. The Rams defense is not the same thing. Like, they are very, very good. I would not be starting Sean Tucker even if Bucky Irving's out. I'm hesitant. I don't think Rachaad White is a better running back by any means, but we should have our restrictions here. We look at Emeka Egbuka. He gets one against Emmanuel Forbes. This defense is almost top 10 in fantasy points allowed to the position there. We have Williams against Johnson as well. And we do have the slot wide receivers here in Chris Godwin and Sterling Shepard getting the most positive matchup against Wallace as far as corners go. You're not going to be starting these slot guys, though, because they just don't get the target share that the better wide receivers in Tez Johnson and Egbuka get. Cade Otton can be put back in our starting lineups this week. I mean, he got the doghouse of the Bills last week, which number one in fantasy points, restricted to tight ends. The Rams side of things, though, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are a pass funnel of a defense. So Matthew Stafford, Puka Nacua gets a very beautiful matchup against Zion McCollum. He's probably wide receiver 2 on the week for me. Devontae Adams, another very positive one for him against Jamel Dean. Kyron Williams, great matchup here. You want to be starting pretty much all these guys. And Tyler Higbee, you're not starting the tight ends. They never target their tight ends. I mean, they do, but they don't have one tight end. They have like 3 that they use. We look down here at the Panthers and the 49ers. The 49ers are expected to win this game by a decent amount and a pretty high game total at 49 points. 3-mile-an-hour winds, 10% chance of rain. 49ers are home, no weather concerns in this one. The 49ers defense, though, has been very, very positive to pretty much every single position in fantasy football. Bryce Young came off his legacy game last week. I am very worried and don't think he's going to return even really close to that performance. But if you need a guy to put in at your quarterback position, you have buys, you have injuries, he can be started for you. Just know he's not a top option that we're putting up our rankings because of last week. Rico Dowdle, great matchup. You're always starting him. Ted McMillan, though, very, very positive one here against Green. And we have Diamador Lenore against Xavier Legette. He is questionable, probably going to play through that hip injury. So I'm not really loving starting him. Even though it is a positive matchup, he's going to be touchdown or bust, so I guess bank him for that. And Jatavion Sanders does get a positive matchup, but we're not starting the tight ends. The 49ers here, the Panthers defense is very, very hit or miss and confusing, I guess you could say. Great against the pass. I mean, Brock Purdy and all these wide receivers, as you can see down here, get more of a negative matchup. Juwan Jennings does get J.C. Horn, which is very, very negative. You can see here I have the Panthers defense stops left wide receivers more than anything, because J.C. Horn is on that side of the field. So Jennings gets a tougher matchup. Ricky Pearsall gets a pretty tough one against Michael Jackson too. He's not really going to be a start until he proves to us that he gets the target share and he's back in this offense the way he should be. You're obviously always starting Christian McCaffrey and George Kittle. And the 49ers defense is number 1 in points per game allowed to slot wide receivers. So this does help Ted McMillan at times as well, but also Jalen Coker. Not that we're going to be putting him in our starting lineup unless you absolutely have to, but that's going to finish out this video, guys. Thank you so much for sticking around in this one. I really enjoy making it, so thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next video coming tomorrow. All glory to the man above.